Hello learners, I am Dr. Aparna Samudram from the Department of Economics, RTM Nagpur University, Nagpur, and I am here to introduce this course of Environmental Economics to you all. This is the very first lecture, and in this we will be talking about the meaning and the subject matter of environmental economics. Before taking you to this journey of environmental economics, my dear learners, let me share a picture with you. As you can see in this picture, we have on the top a case of high industrialization along with a lot of air pollution. On the other hand, we are also seeing a very green farm, and in order to increase the agricultural productivity, a rampant use of pesticides can be seen. Why is this happening? Because any economy of the world, whether it is a developed economy, a developing economy, or a lesser developed economy, all of them want to achieve a high rate of economic growth or a growing GDP, as we call it in economics. The resources which are given to us by the nature are being used up to take care of the present human needs. This scenario has created an imbalance in the environment and the economy. As you can see in the second picture, the environment is taking a downside compared to the industrial growth, which is a part of the GDP growth. But learners, this is not the time to stop here. We still have a choice to bring this imbalance of environment and the economic growth back to the desired level. And how do we do that is what we are going to explore in this course of environmental economics. To start with today's lecture, let us see what all are we going to explore today. The first thing we will be talking about is we are going to define what is environmental economics. Thereafter, we'll understand the origins of this subject of environmental economics, and then we'll understand the various approaches which are under the subject matter of environmental economics. What is environment? We all know that environment refers to the surroundings or the conditions in which living organisms exist and interact. It is composed of all biotic and abiotic components. The use of land, air and water by human beings and by all the living organisms form what is called as environment. On the other hand, when we talk about economics, we say economics is a social science that studies how individuals, businesses, governments and societies allocate scarce resources to satisfy the unlimited wants and needs. This is a very popular definition of economics taken from Robbins, who says that the resources are limited, whereas our wants are unlimited. So, in order to make the choice and to get the wants, satisfy the wants that we want, we need these scarce resources, and they can only be done when we make choices. So, the allocation of the resources which are limited in nature to take care of the needs of the individuals, of the businesses, government and the societies is done under the subject of economics. As you can very well make out, environment and economy or the economic growth are interrelated to each other. We take as individuals, as households, as producers, the resources, natural resources which are given to us by the environment. Environment is providing us with these resources in terms of land resources, in terms of water, in terms of minerals, and we use these resources to take care of the production as well as the consumption. Not only this, when we do any type of economic activity, environment also is a sink to take care of the wastage that we make. So environment is giving to the economy. Also, on the other hand, economy is also giving back to the environment. How? One, as we have just seen, that when we utilize these resources, the waste are again deposited back to the environment in terms of residues. On the other hand, as the economic growth takes place, what happens is that with the growth, we use the resources in a better way. We may be needing lesser resources to produce the same amount of things. So it is not only in the negative sense that economy or the economic growth is taking from the environment. The economy is also giving certain positive externalities. By better technology, we are using less resources. We are providing better healthcare facilities, which is taking care of the environment later on. So it is a circular relationship which we see in the environment and the economy. Now let us define environmental economics. As we've just seen that economics as a subject cannot exist in isolation by just understanding that how goods and services are being produced or allocated. Why? Because whatever production or consumption we are doing, we have to understand that what is the impact of the use of these resources on the environment. So, let us formally now define environmental economics. So, environmental economics studies what? First, it studies the role that the environment plays on the economy. Also, it studies the impact the economy has on the environment. And then, it also talks about the appropriate ways of regulating economic activity so that the balance is achieved among environment, economic and other social goals. So, environmental economics is basically the application of the models of economics, the solution given by economics in order to solve the environmental problems. Going further, we can say that environmental economics can be defined as that part of economics which deals with the interrelationship between environment and economic development. As we saw in the previous slide, that there is a circular relationship which we get to see between environment and economy. This kind of interrelationship that happens between the environment and the economic development that is taking place is studied by the subject of environmental economics. What does it study? It studies the ways and means by which the former, that is the environment, is not impaired, nor the latter is impeded. That is, we are not saying that we sacrifice all the economic development and growth for the sake of environment. Neither it is accepted that we exploit the environment to take care of the needs of the current generation. What environmental economics is going to talk about is that how we can go with a relationship where both environment and economic development can sustain. Taking care of the growth of the economy along with the taking care of the environment is what is going to be studied in this subject of environmental economics. So, it is teaching us how to promote economic growth of the nations with least environmental damage. Now, how has this environmental economics field emerged? Unlike the pure economics, the field of environmental economics has recently emerged more so in 1960s. It has emerged as a response to the escalating concerns about environmental degradation and the need for integrating economic analysis into the environmental policy making. The foundational work of environmental economics has started with Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring. This book raised awareness about the environmental impacts of pesticides. Particularly, she started this on the spraying of DDT and how it impacted not only the pests but also the living organisms. This particular book raised a lot of public interest in the environmental conservation. A very famous quote of Rachel Carson from the book is, "In nature, nothing exists alone." That is, human beings, just by exploiting nature, cannot think that now we will grow and we will take care of, and the environment will take care of itself. When we do something wherein we are over-exploiting the environment, ultimately, it is going back to come to the human beings. So, in nature, nothing exists alone. This is what she quoted. Thereafter, the pioneering economists who have talked in the context of environmental policy are Kenneth Boulding, John D. Black, and Kenneth Arrow, who began applying economic principles to environment issues in 1960s and 70s. However, environmental economics in this context was only revolving around the new classical economic school of thought. The key contributions of these economists were on the research where they highlighted the role of market failures, the externalities, and the property rights, which were driving the environmental degradation. So they discussed that how the environmental goods, which generally do not have any private property rights, it leads to further environmental degradation. And then how, by making certain economic policies, we can lead to an efficient environmental growth and economic development. Now, after understanding growth of this subject of environmental economics, now let us understand that what is the subject matter of environmental economics. We have 6 approaches to the subject matter of environmental economics. The first is the natural resources scarcity approach. Then we have Marxist ecological approach. Then we have a Chicago approach, followed by the conservation approach, technological approach, and socio-economic approach. So learners, let us understand all these approaches one by one. So let me start with the natural resource scarcity approach. This approach can be understood in the light of the theories and insights laid by the classical economists. Even though these classical economists did not specifically give any theories or the research on environment, but what they said at that time in their theories is very much relevant to the subject of environmental economics. This natural resource scarcity approach basically emphasizes that the nature's resources, the earth's resources, are finite in nature. And whatever we do today have their implications on their potential depletion. That is, natural resources, like any other resources, are scarce in nature or they are finite. They are not infinite. What are the key concepts? First, as we've just seen, that natural resource scarcity approach says that natural resources such as fossil fuels, minerals, fresh water, and biodiversity are limited in quantity and therefore are subject to depletion. When there is over-exploitation of these resources by way of excessive extraction of the minerals, consumption of these resources is also excessive. This leads to environmental degradation and eventually it leads to an ecosystem collapse. What are the economic implications of this ecosystem collapse or excessive environmental degradation is that these resources further become scarce. And then the scarcity of these resources results in rising prices because the raw materials have now become scarce. Also, because raw materials have become scarce and their prices have risen, it leads to increased production cost and hence it disrupts the markets because people who were earlier getting access to these resources may not be able to buy these resources, these goods, because they have become expensive. So the market disruptions takes place. Prominent among these theories or the classical economists who have talked about natural resource scarcity approach is Malthus. Malthus is known for his theory of population, wherein he said that in any economy or in any country, the population grows at a geometric rate, whereas the food production or the agriculture production is at a arithmetic progression. Therefore, there comes a point when the population grows very high and the agriculture cannot or the food production cannot match up this population growth. Hence, what we call is that as a Malthus catastrophe. That is, automatically then this high population cannot sustain because they will not be able to get the food which is required to keep them healthy. So ultimately what Malthus is also talking about is that when we do not take care of our food production or agriculture production, which at those times was highly dependent on the weather, on the quality of soil, it leads to ultimately the downfall of the humankind. Second economist, John Stuart Mill, also emphasized the finite nature of these non-renewable mineral resources. And then he also highlighted in 1848 that how important it is to have sustainable resource management so that we have a long-term societal well-being. So today when we talk about the sustainable development goals or when we say that the sustainability is the buzzword, it was John Stuart Mill who talked about it back in 1848. Ricardo, another very important classical economist, argued that the relative scarcity becomes more pronounced as economy grows and population increases. Here we are talking about the scarcity of the natural resources. Particularly, Ricardo talked about the availability of fertile land which is being used for the purpose of agriculture. So what does he say? He says that as the population grows and there is a high growth of economy, the land will become relatively scarce. And this relative scarcity affects resource prices because land which are more fertile will demand a higher price. This will also have an impact on the income distribution and hence the allocation of resources within the economy. So, whatever classical economists said, their theories and insights have laid down the groundwork for understanding resource constraints and their implications for economic growth and development. Coming to the next approach of the subject matter is given by Karl Marx. So the Karl Marxist ecological approach as we call it. We all know that Marx is a proponent of the socialism. The Marxist ecological approach examines the interconnections which are there between capitalism, the social relations and the ecological degradation. What is his argument? According to him, that capitalism inherently exploits nature for profit, that it is the nature of capitalism to exploit nature just because they want to earn greater profits. In doing so, what they are doing is they are degrading the environment and leading to resource depletion. Also, he says that every capitalist wants to introduce labor-saving methods. Why? Because they want to make more profits. They do not want to share this profit surplus with the labor. Hence, they replace labor with machines. Because of this, there is pollution and resource depletion. So, the natural environment is polluted by installing more machines by these capitalists. Also, he says that under capitalism, it is not only the labor which is being commodified, it is nature also which is being commodified. Why? Because nature is treated as a source of raw material. That is, we are taking raw materials for the purpose of production. And not only that, we are also disposing the waste back into the nature. So nature is not only a source of raw materials according to Marxists, but it is also a sink for waste disposal. So in the pursuit of endless growth and accumulation, it drives the unsustainable exploitation of natural resources. Friedrich Engels was also a collaborator of Marx, and in his Dialectics of Nature in 1925, he says that everything affects and is affected by every other thing. That is, let us not flatter ourselves overmuch on the account of our human conquest over nature, because for each such conquest takes its revenge on us. What does he say? He says that human beings should not think that they have conquered the nature because they are using all its resources. By not giving it back to the nature, what we are doing is that we are taking away from the nature and thinking that nature cannot do anything. But we have to understand that for every conquest we do on nature, the nature is going to take revenge on us. As we see these days, that with vast deforestation, with vast overexploitation of resources, how the world is facing the problem of climate change and global warming. So that is a very classic example of what Friedrich Engels had said. Further, he developed his thoughts when he saw rapid industrialization during the 19th century. He witnessed pollution, deforestation, habitat destruction, and poor living conditions in the industrial cities. So, again he said that man is a product of nature. So, Engels' crucial contribution was his critique of notions of absolute human conquest of nature. That is, when people think that we have conquered nature and nature cannot do anything to us, we are wrong here, because whenever we are over exploiting nature, nature is going to give back to what we have done to her. Also, he talked about imperialism and global environmental impact. Because he also belonged to the sociological school of Marxist, he said that the capitalist expansion and imperialism drives ecological destruction on a global scale. For example, when we see globalization, there is so much of globalization that we are seeing vast exploitation of very big factories getting established even in the very interior parts of the states. This has driven ecological destruction, which is not restricted to any one country, but it has got itself on a global scale. So, capitalist countries, according to them, exploit natural resources, particularly in the global south, leading to environmental degradation, and this leads to social upheaval because there are few who are not getting benefit of this particular economic growth. The next approach we will be discussing is the Chicago approach to environmental economics. This approach is characterized with the belief of efficacy of the market system. That is, markets fail means the invisible hand principle, which is there for fair allocation of resources, fails to do that because of externalities. What are externalities? Where one party's action is having an impact on a third party. Now, this action can be a positive or it can be negative. But market is not offering any price for this service or disservice. Therefore, they developed what is very well known as a Coase theorem, which we will be doing subsequently in this course as well. The key concept here is that externalities are stemming from unclear or inappropriate assignment of property rights. That is, generally the environmental goods do not belong to any private person. Hence, there is a lot of damage or there are a lot of externalities which are stemming because of these lack of property rights. And what have they advocated? They have advocated market-based solutions to these environmental problems such as emission trading systems and pollution taxes. The next approach we have is the conservation approach to environmental economics. This particular approach emphasizes the importance of preserving natural resources and ecosystems for present and future generations. That is what we call as sustainable. That is, it is not only the right of the present generation to enjoy the gifts of nature, but we have to do the economic development in such a way that the future generations also have access to the resources of the mother nature. The one perspective here is given by K.W. Kapp. What did he argue? He argued that the destruction of renewable resources results from uncontrolled competition in their utilization. That is, there is no one to control the utilization of these renewable resources. He addressed this issue by saying that we have to stop the overutilization of both renewable and non-renewable resources, and he highlighted the great waste in the production and disregard for the future consequences. That is, unmindfully, production is being done from the renewable resources, non-renewable resources particularly, without considering that what is going to happen in the future. K.E. Boulding also gave a similar perspective under the conservation approach, wherein he said that Earth's environmental resources are essential, but they are irreplaceable social capital. Social capital means that these do not belong to any one particular individual or a business house. The resources of the earth are resources of the society. So, the main purpose of any economic activity should be to conserve these natural capital intact for the future generations. Hence, he emphasized that the environment is the potential resource on which humanity depends. Both of them, that is, this conservation approach, talks about diachronic solidarity. That is, we should not be thinking of the short-term goals. It compels us to reject the predatory and short-term economic practices and stresses on the importance of the sustainability of resources to ensure the well-being of the future generation. Let us just revise what we have done. We have understood that environmental economics is concerned with the impact of environmental activities on the environment. Environmental economics is relatively a new field of study in the economics, and it developed in the present form in the 1960s, when economists realized that economic growth to be indefinitely sustainable, the economic system must consider the environmental usage in order to prevent depletion of natural resources. Some of the approaches which we have done today is in this lecture is on natural resource scarcity, Marxist ecological approach, Chicago and conservation approach. The rest of the two approaches we will be doing in the next lecture. So thank you till then.